Hi, I'm Amy Fisher, and welcome to Amy Fisher at Large. Today we're at the Cornelius House, which is the Middlesex County Museum, and the first person we're talking to is Ken Helsby, who's the museum educator. Hi Ken, nice to see you.
Hi, you too.
Let's start with a little bit of background about the House. When was it built?
The Lau House was built in 1741 by Cornelius Lau, who was a prosperous merchant here at the community that was known as Raritan Landing.
Now, it has obviously quite a history. When did the Middlesex County freeholders acquire it for a museum?
It was acquired by the freeholders in 1979 from the last owner of the house, Mrs. Strong, and the county decided to make it into a local history museum rather than furnishing it as a period house, so that way we could interpret more of New Jersey's history and the house's role in the community.
So actually, someone actually lived here until 1979?
Right, yeah, and the house was a private house for 260 plus years until the freeholders bought it, and only 4 families actually owned the house after Lau died in 1777. So it was relatively well preserved and taken care of, and it remains today as one of the last remaining houses from Raritan Landing.
Was it added on to during those years?
No, in fact, it was taken away from. The Metler family that owned the house during the later period of the 1800s actually removed the kitchen wing from the house. We're not sure why, but the shadow of that wing still remains on the side of the house in our parking lot, and perhaps you might get a chance to check that out later.
So the Metler family is the family that Metler's Lane in Piscataway was named
Right,
after?
the Metlers were very big in this area, including the Metler Bodine house, which is just down the road, which had a fire, unfortunately, last summer. But Mr. Metler actually owned this property as well at one point.
Now you're the museum educator, which means that you conduct workshops for students?
Right, yeah.
So now the current exhibit is about New Jersey and the Civil War.
Right, it's our long endurance, the story of New Jersey and the Civil War.
And this is going to be up for a long time, right?
Yeah, the exhibit's up actually through December of 2005, and we plan on changing it at the end of this year to freshen it up a little bit and put new things in the museum that will attract visitors back. Even though they've seen the exhibit, they won't feel like they're going to see the same thing over and over again.
Well, now I think we'll go inside and we'll see the room where you conduct your workshops.
Great, I'll take you into the campsite.
Okay. Okay, well, Ken, now we're in the education room. Could you tell us what's in here and how you use this room when you do workshops for students?
Well, we wanted to make the room significant and important for kids. Since our main clientele at the museum is school groups, sometimes as often as as young as 4th grade through 6th grade, we wanted to bring the exhibit home for kids and to see what young soldiers primarily were doing during the Civil War, because oftentimes some soldiers, even as young as 10 years old, were fighting during the war, doing other chores and activities around camp. So we designed this room as a campsite to show how young soldiers spent the most difficult time of the war, and that was the time spent at camp between battles. Fighting boredom was very difficult, and so these young soldiers that were away from home, sometimes for the first times, had to come up with ways to keep themselves occupied and not miss home too much.
Now this is about the New Jersey contingent. Were there actual Civil War battles fought in New Jersey?
No, and that's why not too many people often think of New Jersey when they think of the Civil War. But as you go through the exhibit in a little bit, what you'll realize is that while we didn't have any battles fought actually on our soil, we did contribute a great deal.
I was amazed when I read the information here that there were, as you said, young men, or young boys actually, 10 years old, 13 years old, 15 years old, and you have an exhibit, particularly a photograph of one young man who joined when he was 16.
Yeah, he actually, Sammy Stoller was the young man that you mentioned, and he was from Frenchtown, New Jersey, and he actually tried to join up when he was 15, but was denied because of his age, and actually convinced his father to let him join the Army the following year, because you could be 16 years old, but you needed your parental consent in order to join the Army.
So what are some of the things here at this campsite that you have?
Well, what we did was we set up the camp to show the kinds of materials that the soldiers would have had to carry with them between battles. We showed the games that they played. We showed the sleeping quarters and how the soldiers would have slept in their tent, and fit 2 soldiers in the tent at one time. It was a little tight. And then we also showed some of the other materials that would have been used around the camp as well, and some of the things that soldiers would have been doing, young soldiers in particular.
Now, some of these flags that you have up, these obviously were made by students. Are these people who have come through the exhibit and then send you flags when they're done?
Actually, they make them here. Part of the workshops is that about 10 or so of the students we picked to go downstairs and create a regiment flag for their class. And it's a way of bringing the exhibit and giving them ownership of the exhibit somewhat. It makes them feel like they were a part of it, and the flag actually stays here, so it can become our record of who's participated in the exhibit and what schools have come and from where. And then they get the directions on how to make their own flag, so they can always make their own classroom flag back at school as well.
Are there any other workshops that you do?
Yes, in fact, since only a handful of students can participate in the flag making workshop, the remaining students from the class stay up here in the campsite with me, and we talk about camp life. And then we talk about some of the slang terms that soldiers used, and because talking was, language was very difficult or different back then as opposed to today. So we introduced the kids to some of the slang terms. And one of the most frequent activities for soldiers to do is to write home. And we talk about why letters would have been written home and what they would have asked for, and how communication between troops and loved ones back home has changed between the Civil War and today's events. And then we have the students actually write a letter home as if they were a young soldier during the Civil War, and try and use as many of those slang terms as they learned on the sheets that we hand out in the course of their letter. So it gives them an idea of what it would have been like to write a letter home, and the kinds of language that would have been used.
So if any school group wanted to come here, they should contact you?
Yes, they can contact the museum at 732-745-4177 for information about the school groups. I'd be more than happy to talk to teachers. And to schedule, we do ask you to call 732-745-4489. And there's a staff person over there at the Cultural and Heritage Commission that will coordinate your school's visit.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I think now we're going to see the rest of the exhibit with its curator.
Great,
So thanks
enjoy.
a lot. Here we are with Joanne Diamichis-Bulla, who is the curator of this wonderful exhibit. Joanne, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about it.
Well, I'm glad you could come.
Could you just sort of give us an overview of the exhibit and then tell us specifically about this room we're in?
Well, the exhibit covers New Jersey's role in the Civil War. When people talk about the Civil War, they very rarely include New Jersey in their conversation because no battles took place here. So it doesn't readily spring to mind when they discuss the Civil War. But New Jersey contributed an enormous amount to the war effort. In addition to troops, our manufacturing centers contributed weapons, clothing, uniforms, leather goods that went to outfit the horses, as well as boots and cartridge boxes and things like that for the soldiers. And as a garden state that we are, we also provided food for the soldiers as well as the horses. So New Jersey has a much larger role in the Civil War than immediately comes to mind.
Yes.
And this room is really the beginning of the exhibit. It starts with pre-war, when New Jersey still had slaves, which it did right up until the year that the war started. We did have a Gradual Abolition Act, which was passed in 1804, but that still allowed for people to remain slaves until they reached certain ages. For girls, it was 21, and for men, it was 25. So New Jersey was always a bit conflicted about where it stood in the Civil War era. It wasn't full force for the Union prior to the war because it was doing a lot of business with the South. It had a very good relationship with the South. People from there would come up and use the resorts like Cape May for vacations. Princeton students came from the South as well as the northern states, and businesses were very reluctant to lose the market that they had selling their manufactured goods to the South. In addition to that, the Mason-Dixon line runs right through the bottom of New Jersey. So, you know, we couldn't get much closer to the South if we tried. And it wasn't really until the firing on Fort Sumter that New Jersey decided to go for the Union cause. But throughout the war, always had this bit of conflict going on. Twice our state voted against Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
So,
I did not know that.
So, you know, we always had that little bit of support still for the Southern ideas.
But the Underground Railroad actually went through New Jersey.
The Underground Railroad passed through New Jersey. The main route went from the southern part, the Burlington County area, and up through to the Jersey City area so that slaves could leave for New York or points north. And in this particular room, we cover a lot of the figures who were active in the Underground Railroad and have pictures of some of the sites that were used as safe houses along the route. So New Jersey, again, you have that conflict. You have people who were extremely active in moving slaves from the southern slave states to freedom. And you also have manufacturers who are afraid of losing their base of sales. So it continues.
It's sort of, I guess, like modern day, you know, it's not, nothing is really one side or the other. There's always sort of like an ambiguous area in the middle that people have to decide which side they're going to be on.
There is, and it was especially true of New Jersey, I think, because of its location.
Yes.
I mean, we're right, we're nearly a border state as far as the Civil War was concerned.
Okay, let's go on to the next room. And now this room shows us what happened in New Jersey after the state decided to get into the war. And so I see you have New Jersey Resolution for the Preservation of the Union. Is that how it all began?
Yes, the Senate passed a resolution in 1861 saying that they felt that the Union should be preserved and that they were going to take steps to join that effort. Of course, what that meant was that now we had to raise an army. New Jersey didn't have a standing army. So you get recruitment posters which promised people what they would get if they joined. In addition to their pay, they could get a bounty, and a bounty was an extra bonus for joining. This particular poster shows a $25 bounty. Sometimes they would be more money, but they would be paid out over intervals to make sure that the people actually stayed in for the amount of time that they signed up for, as opposed to taking the bounty and skipping out and then joining someplace else and collecting it again, which sometimes happened. So once they were recruited, of course, these were just your average citizen. They didn't really have training in military things, in shooting and military discipline. So they would go off to one of the 14 training camps that were established throughout New Jersey and stay there for a period of a couple of weeks to a couple of months, depending on when they actually were enlisted. And so we have information about the various camps, and we have pictures of troops going off to war from New Jersey sites. We also have information about, again, that conflict. We have families who were divided, brother who fought brother, sometimes because one brother was living in the South, married to a Southern woman, you know, actually owned plantations at that point, and so joined the Confederate Army, while his brother, who still lived in New Jersey and, you know, perhaps was a lawyer or involved in a business joined the Union. And we have a couple of families represented. And we also have students who went to Princeton. Of course, when the war started, those who came from the South went home and joined the Confederate Army, while their classmates stayed and joined the Union cause.
Now, Joanne, this room tells us some of the places that the New Jersey troops fought. Could you tell us about some of the battles they were in?
Well, when the war started, New Jersey, like most of the states from the North, thought that this was going to be a very short war because the North had everything. They had the economic advantage, they had numbers, they had manufacturing, they had money, they had an organized army, an organized government. So there's actually a quote in here from a New Jersey congressman who said that this rebellion could easily be put down by a few women with broomsticks. Once they got into the battles, the first Battle of Bull Run, those assumptions were totally changed. They realized that this was not going to be the short war that they thought it was. The South was, first of all, extremely motivated to win. They were fighting on their home turf, and they were fighting for what they saw as their way of life, and so they fought much more fiercely, with more determination than was expected. What we've done in here is cover most of the battles that New Jersey's troops fought in, Gaines Mills and Gettysburg. You start to see this progression. At the beginning, we were not doing too well. The Union forces were not doing that well. And then gradually, those things which the North did have in its favor started to win out, in addition to which the officers started to be better as Lincoln moved generals around. And eventually, what we have in this room is the surrender at Appomattox.
Now you have some interesting artifacts here, including a drum. Who owned the drum?
Well, the drum and all the items in the adjacent display belonged to Alexander Vandoni. And he was a soldier from the Morris County area. He was a drummer. And we have his drum, we have one of his books, which has all the drum rolls and things that he would need to know. We have his canteen and his hat and his pocket Bible, and a little journal that he carried with him, and there's actually sketches of some of the battlefields that he was on. So we're fortunate to have that.
And you also have a uniform of someone who was wounded and then had his uniform repaired?
Yes, Captain Willits, who actually was wounded a few times during the war, but after this one particular wound, which left a hole in the side of his coat, he had the coat repaired, and he continued to wear it after that, probably so people could ask him about when he got wounded in the war.
And the picture is actually owned by General McClellan?
Yes, the average soldier used tinware for their food, and we have a picture of the various implements that they would eat with. But General McClellan, who did have quite a high opinion of himself, had an entire field service made at Tiffany's, and it's silver-plated, and we have an example of that in the hot water pot.
Interesting. Well, now we're going to go to the room that tells us about what was going on the home front in New Jersey during the war. Well, now, Joanne, this is really fascinating room because this tells us what was really happening in New Jersey while the other people were off fighting. What were some of the things that were manufactured here during the Civil War?
Well, Trenton was especially noted for its iron manufacturing, and that iron went into weapons, everything from cannon to swords to steel plates for the ironclad ships. Camden produced woolen goods, so that was used for uniforms and blankets. Newark had clothing, so they also did uniforms, but they did a lot of leather items, saddles and cartridge cases and holsters and things like that. Keyport was big in the production of steamships, and the steamships were pressed into service for the war. Not actually manufactured just for the war effort, but because they were being built or had just been built and were being used in the waters around here, they were commandeered by the Army.
And in Patterson, there was a locomotive company, right?
Yes, Patterson produced locomotives, the most famous of which was the General, which Union spy tried to steal at one point from them and led them on quite a chase. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't successful, and his entire band was caught and he was hung.
Mm. Now, that brings up that one of the other topics you cover in this room is widows in mourning, and you do have a mannequin dressed as a widow, which I understand scares some of the people who come through.
Yeah, I guess people aren't expecting to see a full-dressed widow from that time period. We do cover that because so many families lost men in the war,
Right.
and that plunged them into mourning. And at the time, mourning was a very regimented process. So the woman that we have dressed here is dressed as a widow, and she would have continued to dress this way for up to 2 years.
Wow.
She would start, as we have her in the display, in complete black. She couldn't wear any shiny jewelry. She didn't go to parties. She only went out for necessary events and things. And then gradually, over the course of those 2 years, she could start to introduce some purple or some gray into her wardrobe. We also have examples of the jewelry that was acceptable for her to wear. She could wear jet, which is black, or she could wear jewelry which was made out of hair, usually hair from the deceased. So we have a bracelet that's braided hair, and it actually has a daguerreotype of the deceased individual on the front of it. This was done because this was their way of remembering the people that they had lost, and the whole mourning process kind of helped them go from the depression that they were thrust into immediately and kind of move them through the phases of mourning. And it also let the people who saw them know where they were, what was going on in their lives, and how to act accordingly. So it was regimented, but it actually had a purpose for them.
Served a purpose, yeah. And the death toll of the Civil War was huge, I know. So it was. I'm sure there were a lot of women walking around wearing these clothes.
A huge number, especially when you consider it relative to the population.
Yes.
So, you know, women had their place in the home trying to keep things together while the soldiers were away. Some of them joined the Sanitary Commission, which we also cover here, which was their means of raising money to send bandages and needed goods to the war effort, especially things that would help the wounded,
Yes.
because that was something that they were especially interested in, and they knew that that was something that needed to be done because we could save a lot more people if we had those items.
Right. So it was really a true effort on just about the part of all kinds of people from the state.
It was between the manufacturers and the farmers who contributed, you know, as I said, food for the
Yes.
troops and salt hay for the horses, through the manufacturing areas of the state. We sent enormous numbers of items.
Well, this is a wonderful exhibit, and I'm sure that everybody in Middlesex County should come to see it, and they'll have time because it's up now. Ken mentioned that you're going to change it at the end of 2004.
In 2004, at the end, we are going to switch out some areas simply because the subject is so huge that in the 6 rooms that we have, we still couldn't possibly cover it all at once. So we will be bringing in some more information about non-combatants who were participants in the war effort, between medical personnel, musicians, chaplains, sutlers, who were the people who provided goods that the soldiers needed but they couldn't get through the Army, people like that. So we will have new information added.
Now, I do want to mention that the group that is sort of oversees this museum is the Middlesex County Cultural
Cultural and
Commission?
Heritage Commission, yes.
Right.
That's the parent organization for the Middlesex County Museum here at the Lau House.
And so it's wonderful that this exists at all. I don't think every county has a museum, do they?
Not every county has a museum. Every county has a Cultural and Heritage Commission, but depending on the county and their resources and interests, they may or may not have as extensive a program as we do.
Right. And so it's really, we're very fortunate that we have this in our county. Well, thank you very much for taking us on a tour of this exhibit. It's wonderful, and we'll hope to come back and see you again one day.
Please do.
Now we're going to speak with Ariti Bulhas, who is the Public Information Officer for the Middlesex County Cultural and Heritage Commission. And Ariti, you're going to tell us about some of the activities that are coming up pretty soon. Now, tell us first of all, what will happen in April?
On Sunday, April 18th at 2 p.m., we have an early American stencil workshop at the East Jersey Old Town Village with the Historical Society for Early American Decoration. Participants of this free workshop will learn how to do early American stencil design, and they'll be doing this on heavy paper, and the paper will be affixed into albums that they can take home. On Saturday, May 22nd at 6 p.m., the Folklife program from New Jersey presents the Nithranjali Institute of Dance with an interpretation of the classical Indian epic Ramayana. This presentation is in collaboration with both Balinese and Indian dancers and musicians from India.
And where will that be held?
This will be held at Plainsboro High School North, 90 Grover's Mill Road in Plainsboro.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And then you have something else going on in June?
In June, here at the Cornelius Lau House Museum, on June 6th from 1 to 4 p.m., we have Meet the Historians Day. We will have 3 Civil War era experts here at the museum for visitors to converse with one-on-one while they tour the museum about Civil War artifacts, images, history, and a variety of other things.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
What is the admission cost to come to the museum?
The admission to the museum is free. It's free and open to the public.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much for arranging this tour for us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to come back again soon.
Thank you. I hope to see you soon. We really enjoyed having you.
Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this exhibit as much as we have, and I hope you have the opportunity to come to see it in person. Thanks again, and we hope that you'll be back with us again next time.